I'm pleased to announce that Gilead now has an EUA from the FDA for remdesivir, an important treatment for hospitalized coronavirus patients. It's really a very promising situation.
And that is President Trump praising preliminary results on remdesivir as the FDA issues an emergency approval for the drug to treat COVID-19. This after a clinical trial showed it shortened recovery times in some of the most severely ill patients with the virus. Joining me now is Peter Pitts. He is a former FDA Associate Commissioner, also president and co-founder of the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest. Good to have you here and want to jump right in, Peter. How historic is this move to this emergency approval? And what's the likelihood of success of remdesivir as a COVID-19 treatment?
Well, remdesivir didn't get an emergency approval. It got an emergency use authorization, which means that it didn't quite meet the approval standards. But considering the crisis that we're in, the benefit that the drug has within a certain patient population and its safety profile allows the FDA to free up doctors to use this as they see fit for their patients in hospital who have what's called serious manifestations of COVID-19, older patients, patients with respiratory problems, and other underlying healthcare conditions. It generally shortens their hospital stay by up to 4 days. And that's clearly great for the patient, but it also frees up beds and ventilators and staff and masks and gowns, et cetera. So this is incredibly important, especially as we move towards reopening the economy, that we have a better handle on how to deal with the population most at risk for COVID-19.
Actually, you're so right, and thanks for clarifying that, because it's what everybody's looking for, and everyone's hopeful. I do have to ask, though, if there are any potential pitfalls in this earlier usage, if you will, and it's great that it's up to the doctors to decide how to use it. Pitfalls both biochemically speaking, maybe side effects that we don't know about. Will it work? And, the emotional disappointment if it doesn't work, as we are all hoping for some sort of treatment to be ready to go.
Well, the good news is that in the randomized controlled clinical trials run out of the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, the safety profile for remdesivir was quite excellent relative to the benefits. So that's good news. Getting people out of the hospital sooner is incredibly good news, and getting them out of the hospital at all is even the best news. The disappointment here, I think, is that the general population is not going to have access, nor should they, to remdesivir. This is, as the president reminded us, only for people in hospital who are suffering more than the general population. That's about 10% of the COVID-19 population. 85% of people with COVID-19 will ride it out at home in bed, drinking plenty of fluids and getting some tender, loving care. So the good news here, the really good news is, even though this isn't a game changer for the majority of the population, it is good news for people in hospital, and that is just crucial.
Absolutely, and we are all pulling for them, of course. So if it's a little bit of a relief or something to move this forward and help them out, it is definitely welcome. Meanwhile, President Trump and his team of experts, they're analyzing 14 potential COVID-19 vaccines. And if you can tell us, Peter, of this batch of 14, if any of them would seem to be a sure shot.
Well, the good news is that there are considerably more than 14, and that speaks to the amazing cooperation between the pharmaceutical industry and academia and government regulators to put all things aside and have an all-hands-on-deck vaccine development proposition. There are some exciting things coming out of Oxford, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline. Many of the large companies in the world are working on this, and we have lots of shots on goal. I'm pretty optimistic. I think we'll have a vaccine within 10 months to a year. And from a vaccine perspective, that's incredibly quick. But we also have to focus on the ability to manufacture these drugs and then get them to the populations that need them. And we'll have to start thinking about prioritizing who gets these vaccines first, second, and third. And then also, there are still regulatory hurdles to be overcome. Senator Mike Braun from Indiana yesterday sent a letter to Vice President Pence and HHS Secretary Alex Azar talking about the CDC's review of vaccines, which they do after the FDA sends its approval. And the CDC can't be a bottleneck here. And I think Senator Braun smartly is pointing out to the Vice President that while the FDA is doing a great job, as is industry, we also have to focus on CDC and make sure they do the right thing as well to make sure these vaccines, once they're approved, get the thumbs up from the CDC so they can get out to the general population and get paid for by the government as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Peter, that said, everything you just said, listen, we are as a society, we're holding our collective breath. We're waiting to exhale for a COVID-19 vaccine. And the president is aiming for a potential January rollout of a vaccine. Is this timeline more realistic or more optimistic?
Well, I think the president, to his credit, is being our nation's optimist in chief. Good for him. But we've really got to avoid a ball of confusion here with multiple guesses. We'll get a vaccine when we get a vaccine. And if the president is saying 6 months, that's terrific. I'm not quite sure what his sources of information are. I'm hearing 10 months to a year. Both are fast. But we can, and we probably should, open the economy without a vaccine. There are things we can do that rely heavily on therapeutics, making sure the sick get the care they need, which we've talked about, but that we also maintain solid personal behavior, social distancing, wearing masks, personal hygiene. If we take this upon ourselves to get it done, we can move from a mitigation strategy where the virus is in control to a containment strategy where we are in control and are doing all the right things. And I think that we can. I'm very optimistic.
But you mentioned something quickly, though, because you've got these protesters out there. They're congregating on beaches because they want to have their rights to be there. And you've got people showing up at the state capitol in Michigan with guns because their rights are being infringed upon. I mean, and you just said that we have to help President Trump and everybody else who's working hard to contain this thing, get a handle on the spread of the virus. So what's your final words on that? What do you say to people who are, we get it. We all feel for the people who need to work. They need to work. The businesses need to be open. They need to be able to employ people, et cetera. But if people are not healthy, then none of that works. What's your final word on that?
Well, God bless America. We get to voice our opinions in all sorts of interesting and creative ways. Guns, not so much. But clearly what I would tell people is, listen, each state is going to have its own pathway forward, its own strategies and tactics. And if we're smart, we can all get it done, not simultaneously, but we'll all get back to the near new normal sooner rather than later.
All right, Peter Pitts, really appreciate your words and your expertise. Thank you very much.